In what comes as more fresh trouble for Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, the head of UK's budget watchdog, Richard Hughes, has called the country's 2025 spending plans unsustainable. Now, commenting over the plan's workability, Hughes called the plan unclear and said that it does not even qualify as work of fiction. Now, the statement comes as the current government spending review is set to expire by April of 2025. Beyond the fiscal year's end, UK's Office for Budget Responsibility is forced to base its forecast on assumptions over the government's daily capital expenditures. Now, Richard Hughes also warned that the post-election government will have to rethink the budget. He expressed concern over government's ability to provide medical support to an aging population. Now, since the financial crisis and the pandemic, UK's national debt has swollen from 40% to almost 100% of the country's GDP and shows no sign of reduction. Amid a shrinking budget and a soaring debt, a senior Tory MP, Simon Clarke, has called on Prime Minister Rishi Sunak to resign from his duties. The former cabinet minister said that the Conservatives face, quote-unquote, an electoral massacre under Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's leadership. The former minister also called the UK's PM's leadership uninspiring. Clarke argued that Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is unable to understand and tend to the needs of the British people. Now, following the statement, Tory leaders from the party hit back at the former minister on social media. The head of One Nation caucus, Damien Green, took to his social media platform X to call Clarke's intervention wrong and unwise. The former Brexit secretary, David Davis, also slammed the comments and said the party and the country are sick and tired of MPs putting their own leadership ambitions ahead of UK's best interests. Now, Liam Fox, the country's former defence secretary, also called out the statements of Tory MP. The ex-secretary said, and I'm quoting him here, "Those who have an agenda to destabilize the government in an election year should understand the consequences." For more on this, we now have our correspondent Julia Chapman, who is joining us live from London. Julia, thank you so much for joining us on this broadcast. First up, do tell our viewers, how does this add to Rishi Sunak's Pandora's box of troubles?
It certainly adds the pressure, although it doesn't appear that there is a major rebellion on his hands. It's certainly not a good look when the Prime Minister receives these kind of messages from formerly very senior cabinet ministers. Certainly this is quite a stark warning for Rishi Sunak, as his Conservative Party is facing really difficult polling at the moment ahead of an expected general election later this year. A recent poll suggested that there would be a 1997-style wipeout. That was the year that the Conservative Party lost a huge number of seats to the opposition Labour Party, which is expected to happen again. But what Sir Simon Clarke is saying in this Telegraph article today is that he believes it's avoidable if there is a change of leadership in the Conservative Party. Now, that is not necessarily a widespread view among the Conservatives, but he insists that although he says Rishi Sunak does have some strengths, and they've worked together quite closely in the Treasury when Rishi Sunak was the Chancellor of the Exchequer, the country's finance minister, he says that he is now the wrong person for the job. He says he has gone from an asset to an anchor, and that his uninspiring leadership is the main obstacle to the recovery of the Conservative Party, which he says is facing extinction if the further right Reform UK party gains momentum over the coming months, which some believe is a risk. Now, there have been a number of leadership battles within the Conservative Party over the last 18 months, ever since Boris Johnson stepped down as Prime Minister. They have each been more damaging than the last to the party and its popularity and the way it's been faring in the polls. So another one could be very risky, but Sir Simon Clarke saying he believes that is the only way for the Conservatives to avoid a massacre in the next election. Downing Street so far has yet to comment.
Okay, now Given in light of the situation that we are seeing and what you speak about the Conservative Party in your remark there, what do you think are the options that Rishi Sunak has should he want to retain his position?
Well, Rishi Sunak and his government are pretty much staking their success on future tax cuts that they are hoping to make in the upcoming budget in March. They borrowed less as a government towards the end of last year, giving a little bit of breathing room when it comes to making some tax cuts. That always goes down well with many voters. We don't know exactly where those cuts could fall, where we could see which groups of people we could see benefiting from that. But pollsters and political analysts don't believe that that is going to be enough to save them from defeat at the general election, which is expected in October or November this year. Rishi Sunak has until December to call an election. The latest possible date would be January next year, but he said he's working on the assumption it will be the second half of this year. And he is holding on. He could have chosen to hold an earlier election, perhaps sometime in May. He appears to be resisting that on the basis that many people expect the Conservative Party to lose. And so he appears to be wanting to stay in power for as long as possible, hoping that perhaps over the summer there could be more favourable economic news which could paint his government in a better light. But it's difficult to see whether that will go far enough to save him from defeat.
Okay. Thank you so much, Julia, for joining us with those insights.